Our story starts with a 2 a.m. email to you, Ryan.
Missed email.
Missed email.
Missed email.
Tell me about the moment that triggered you, that you knew something was going on.
Yeah, look, we had a legacy system. This is kind of going back a little bit in time. We had this legacy system that wasn't particularly reliable, and so I haven't slept a lot for the best part of 10 years, and 2 a.m. is kind of the witching hour for things going wrong. And so even with our new system, we have a set of automated email alerts that are meant to come out, job is finished, job has started. And in this particular instance, I woke up, spider sense kind of thing, and started checking emails. And not only was that email missing, but it was kind of like we'd lost email at some point in time. And so that kind of kicked off a series of frenzied phone calls, getting shuffled into a car and driven into the city to the office to try and work out exactly what had gone on.
And when you're talking missing email, is it a particular type of email or is it just email in general?
I was expecting a particular kind of email. So we're talking like, integration job, A has finished, happy days kind of thing. But there was a whole collection of things kind of missing. It was like, at some point in time, email had just stopped moving around the company.
Okay. And so when this triggers, you said you're driving straight into the city, into the office here in Brisbane?
I got driven in. I may have been in a little bit of a flurry at the house and was told I shouldn't drive a car.
No safety drive.
Yeah, well, it was like, I think I'll drive you. You seem like a little bit worried. So the wife drove me in and, kind of just started looking at the different systems and trying to find out what had gone on.
Okay. And so when you're trying to diagnose this problem and understand the severity of it, where do you start?
It's a really interesting one, right? At the time, it was kind of what could I log into that worked properly? And from that, you start building a bit of a picture. The email side of things, we had a legacy email server that used to fall over a little bit, but this just didn't smell like that. It looked like something else was a little bit wrong.
Okay. And then I'm assuming you've got HopgoodGanim involved.
Yeah, I think by 8 o'clock, Anita had reached out to Hayden.
Yes, I got a very, very stressed out call from City Beach's CIO at that time, early that morning. And look, we were able to get straight onto it at that point. I think, a key thing is getting legal involved early on in these things for a number of reasons. Number one, I think it's just good to have a sounding board to someone who deals with these things often. The first reaction when something just chaotic is going down like this is to panic, and sometimes in panic we can do silly things. So it's just good to take that breath and slow down and think about what we do next. And the other really important reason that we should be engaged early as lawyers is it enables us to attach our superpower, which is legal professional privilege, and make sure that privilege attaches to the communications between the data breach response team, because we need to, in order to manage this properly, we need to have that team going, we need to have communications channels set up, and we need to make sure that people can feel like they can talk freely without, creating some written document which could be used against them later in time by a regulator or something else. So really critical first step, and that's what we're here for, to help sort of be that sounding board and take a deep breath and plan out what we do next.
Gotcha. And so as an IT professional and having worked in businesses, knowing IT people, and I don't think you're like most IT people, but the problem usually goes straight into the technology.
Yeah.
How did you know to bring legal in and legal partners in so early?
Look, you're right, like diving straight in and, root cause analysis of what's gone wrong from a tech perspective is number one thing 90% of people will do. And so, getting not just the leadership team at City Beach all on deck. I think everyone was in the office by about 8:30. Directors bringing burritos in and all kinds of stuff. But we just knew that if anything was really wrong, that having the legal team on site and engaged early would allow us to really make sure we made all the right moves. But also we knew we'd need some assistance that we just didn't have internally. We've never had to look at, forensic email analysis. We've never had to look at, the up or down side of our cyber event before. So we knew Hayden would have someone tucked away in the Rolodex. And so luckily he did. And I think we had our Ghostbuster team from McGrath Nickel in the office by maybe 10 a.m. With all their little suitcases of stuff and set up in our boardroom ready to go.
That's right.
And so Hayden and Steve, when you get phone calls like this from clients, is there a checklist or a process that you go through that is for every kind of breach?
look, there certainly is a process that we work through for every breach. Every breach has its own sort of little quirks and differences, and we've got to be prepared to be agile on our feet. But that being said, there are certain things that we should always look to do. As I already mentioned, establishing legal professional privilege critical. Another important thing is making sure that the business preserves the evidence and logs around what's happened, because we need to forensically capture that evidence. It can be so critical in our analysis later down the track. So a really important early thing that we as lawyers advise clients to do is to have us on their behalf engage digital forensic experts, making sure that they capture the relevant information promptly, making sure that the business in its vigor to get operations up and going again doesn't overwrite logs and lose key information, because that information can be most important later when we're trying to do things like, understand whether there's a real risk of serious harm. We rely on that data and use that to determine whether or not we need to give notification, and potentially to how many particular people they need to be notified.
It's an interesting point, because when you have breaches like this, whether it's security or systems down or otherwise, there is a bit of panic, and people are kind of just going to fixing mode, especially when you've got directors involved and all sorts of things. It's really interesting that you say you've got to think about not only fixing the problem, but diagnosing and how you use it post-problem analysis. I'm assuming that because you had the guys on hand ready to go, that this is a relationship that wasn't you from the 2 a.m. email.
Oh, look, for sure, right? I mean, calling a random lawyer at 5 a.m. in the morning, I think I'm going to need some help. Usually not the kind of phone call you make for the first time.
Done it before, but not in this scenario.
Different type of help.
Yeah, exactly right. Bail bond or something.
Yeah.
Look, it's one of those things that building those relationships just as part of your normal everyday business is critical. And whether that's, with your legal team, with your accountants, third-party tech providers, all of those things kind of help out in a scenario like this where you can pick up the phone to those, trusted relationships and engage early.
Yeah. I think that's critical. Like, these incidents can be so big and all-consuming. You need a team. It's a team effort. You need your internal team. You need your legal team. You need external forensic help. You may need PR. You really need to be thinking about all those requirements and assemble it quickly and rapidly, and making sure that team is constantly informed as the events mature and as more information is learned, so that we know how to respond as best as we can and get the best outcome we can for the business.
Nathan, there's two other players that we sometimes add to the team over the course of the event. In addition to comms, you might add an insurance advisor, either your broker or someone you have an insurance relationship with, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to make an insurance claim on your cyber policy after the event, and a lot of that work needs to be started in parallel to all of the good legal and forensic work that's happening as well. The second, the other additional team member is, if we're in what I call notification territory and we need to communicate with affected individuals, people whose information has been compromised, we sometimes engage another provider like ID Care, who can manage those communications in an effective, scalable way and make sure the messaging that goes out is clear and consistent, without drawing those resources away from the business, and or costing as much as lawyers do.
Exactly. And you think about it, with these data breaches that happen, you might potentially have to correspond with 100,000 people or more. Now, we didn't need to do that here because we got a great outcome, but that can happen. And if you're going to correspond with 100,000 people, does the business even have the resources to do it? It would be a huge distraction from day-to-day business. So there's so many things that need to be thought of in order to make sure that you're prepared to respond to these sorts of incidents.
So I can imagine here that it's starting to get a bit complicated, especially in your scenario here, that you've got all these different parties involved. If we go to the City Beach scenario, how did you keep everyone aligned and informed along the way?
Look, it's a hard one. I mean, I was lucky to have a really strong leadership team with me, a lot of tenure between us and tenure working together. So I was able to kind of carve off those key components. So I was able to hand off, the director comms and the external business engagement to our COO at the time, and then grab my team and really focus on remediation, providing the assets and different information the forensic team needed as well.
And as a legal team, how did you guys find the flow of information, especially when it gets into that really technical side, which I imagine it did? how did you kind of pull the two worlds together?
Yeah, look, it's always a challenge, but in this particular instance, I think the team did a really good job. You had the City Beach internal technical team working seamlessly with the external cyber forensic team. They were all undergoing a real well thought out process to capture data, understand the extent of what had happened, really get to grips with that, and that sort of then enables us as the legal team to obtain and distill all that technical information. And then we need to then put that through our legal lens, which by and large involves us performing what we call a serious harm test on the data set, assisted by technology as well. So look, it's critical. We're the types of lawyers that don't shy away from technical speak or technical data. It's critical to understanding the scope of the incident and understanding what's happened. But ultimately, it's a team effort, and we really need to get good data for us to get a good result for our clients.
Gotcha. Now, we can't leave everyone in suspense. They're probably wondering how this all ends up.
A lot of sleepless nights and a lot of hard work is the best way to put it. Our HR meeting room has a very comfortable couch. Great power naps. Look, at the end of the day, as Hayden mentioned, we got a really good result, right? We got to really narrow down the number of affected individuals. Things that you don't consider as part of BAU is what is in people's mailboxes. What is the risk associated with my mailbox, your mailbox? In this scenario, a HR mailbox. What software is being used across the business that you don't know about? The old shadow IT kind of thing. Because you can buy it on a credit card doesn't mean that you should use it. And so, great outcome at the end. A lot of significant and serious lessons learned around kind of controlling that tech space. And a lot of these team members don't do malicious things on purpose, right? Like, you don't go and get an application to do something because you're trying to circumvent IT. It just seems like a good idea at the time, and what might have been a small proof of concept for a recruitment drive becomes a core part of how you operate. And then next thing you know, it's full of customer data or employee data, and now you've got a problem.
So from where to go, 2 a.m. email to resolution and a bit more calm, what are we talking?
Look, we got back to, I guess, a normal trading perspective within 48 to 72 hours with no impact to trade or operations, but a much longer journey to revisit the entire IT strategy and workshop that for, I guess, what we call the new world.
And what were the key activities post that period of resolving what's there? What were the key activities or the key outcomes that came after that you implemented at City Beach?
Staff training and education is a key one. You'd be surprised how many people will click on any email that comes through, right? An invoice that you think might be for your house, which isn't, a fake parcel, all those kind of things. That education piece is critical. And it goes, I guess, missed, underappreciated a lot of the time. And so we went through what we call Cyber Month, where every week we did some education, sent out some videos to all our key team members, and we keep revisiting that because that threat landscape evolves. At the moment, there's a huge amount of SMS scams going out, which can hijack your phone and steal your details. Really great stuff. And at the end of the day,
I received a few of those over the past day.
Yeah, it's awesome,
we were talking about that
Yeah.
this morning.
Solution is don't have an Android phone.
Yeah.
But unless people know how to interact with technology, you'll never beat the problem, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge part for us. Our entire security stack we revisited. We've engaged a number of additional third parties as well in that security space. Riot, local Brisbane security provider, do what we call eyes on glass monitoring. So all of our logs, everything filters through their system, and they alert us when weird and wonderful things go on. So trying to be ahead of it as opposed to behind it.
Gotcha. And from a broader retail perspective, we were obviously talking about an email threat here. What are the other common threats that you guys see in the retail sphere?
I was like, you name it.
There's a lot.
It's sort of the laundry list of cyber attack potentials. When you think of the, as you call it, attack surface of the business, there are so many tools involved. There are so many touch points in the business that anything is almost a target, whether it's the cash register on the desk or the IT system in the back office.
There's a lot of phishing scams, always a common thing, and phishing scams that are quite targeted, trying to compromise a highly credentialed account or escalate what's a low account into a highly credentialed account, so they can really do some serious damage. We do see a bit of that. There's lots of ransomware activity at the moment. Crypto locker type attacks that we see on a regular basis, you name it, that it's there. So businesses really do need to be prepared for it.
The other email compromise that tends to come in, not just phishing, but once those account credentials have been obtained, some attackers will look to create financial exploits. So if they can detect there's a financial transaction being conducted over email, or that they can intercept and modify an invoice, suddenly they may be able to be paid tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars without the business detecting it for weeks or months at a time.
And do you find most of the damage is done by really sophisticated schemes, or is it more cloak and dagger stuff?
I want to say it's both sides of the fence, right? So, like, cybercrime is hugely Northern European based, is probably the nicest way to put it. But at the same time, a young kid can go on the dark web, download some software for $15 and wreak the same amount of havoc, right? The whole idea of software as a service is great when it's benefiting you. You know, cloud-based service providers are everywhere. But that's how ransomware operates now as well, right? Like, I can buy your server for an hour. I can buy a list of potential targets for $100, and off I go. Maybe I get $1 million payday.
And in terms of
Pretty good
protection, pretty good payday. Not compared to what a CIO at City Beach gets, but
I don't know, mate. Average ransomware income is like $100 million a year. It sounds pretty good.
It's okay.
Hey, you get some good clothes. Though, right?
That's right. We've talked a lot about retailers taking responsibility and training teams, being aware, having great partners. From a regulatory point of view, what's in place to protect retailers, and what do retailers have to comply with?
Yeah, so I mentioned at the start, how great it was that lawyers were engaged right at the start. Obviously, self-interest in that, but it was, it's good for a number of reasons. Another really important reason is it gives us the maximum timeline that we potentially have to understand the incident. So when something happens, if we're dealing with the Australian scheme, we have an obligation to potentially investigate and notify as soon as practicable, and no later than 30 days from reasonably suspecting that a notifiable data breach may have occurred within your organisation. So that's the sort of time frame we're looking at in Australia. But understanding what's at play is critical, because we might have other jurisdictions which are relevant, like GDPR, in which case we've got a much tighter 72-hour window. Again, doesn't necessarily require that you know everything within that window, but you really need to be conscious of what's happening, and you need to understand and move quickly on this and understand as much as you can. The legal regime is really geared around making sure organisations investigate, making sure they understand what's happened, and making sure that if they, do consider that, there has been a data breach which does have a real risk of causing serious harm to an individual, that they give notice to the regulator and the affected individuals. And there's good, basis and common sense for that. If an individual knows that something has happened to their data, they can take proactive steps. They can cancel their credit cards. You can notify government agencies that, government-related identifiers have been potentially compromised. All these things can be done, which can help, mitigate the damage for others. So that's really the basis behind the law and what's there. Again, our job as lawyers is to come in and help the client understand that process, and also to minimise the impact on the business and also the end individuals. There's no point just falling on your sword straight away and just giving notice to everyone, even when those people don't even have a real risk of serious harm. That's just going to freak people out and damage customer trust, so critical to the retail industry. So these are the types of things I'd be encouraging retailers to think about.
Yeah, it feels like there's no end to the threats. They'll just get more sophisticated. They'll change. The tactics will change. They'll always be there.
100%, right? It's not when.
Yeah.
It's not if, it's when, right? Everyone's going to suffer something at some point. It's like sad reality is that everyone's a target. Everyone has something that someone else wants, right? And, that's just the world we live in.
So I think I've got a lot of the key themes out of here today, but if I was going to leave with your top tip for retailers in something simple that they can do in their organisation to be ahead of the game, what would you recommend?
Sounds self-serving, but invest in IT. A lot of retail industry in particular is very lean in that space. And revisiting your tech stack, every 6 to 12 months for all your key components. Not necessarily ERP, but anything that protects your network and moves data around. They're the things that kind of get forgotten about at times.
Look, get your legal team involved early on. There are so many important reasons why, but critical, to ensuring that the organisation can communicate, that the organisation is protected, and that we understand what risks are out there. We understand what legislative obligations we might have, what contractual obligations we might have. What should we do best in a PR sense to make sure we maximise and hold on to that customer trust? These are all really key things that I think organisations should take away and think about carefully. And when thinking about the legal provider that you use, making sure that you engage someone that does this on a regular basis. We've done this so many times before that we know exactly what's at play, and when stress is high, as it is in instances like this, you need an experienced pair of hands to look after it.
One more, I'm not pretending that a data breach is anything but an uncomfortable, painful experience to go through. I think that's probably understating it, right?
Yeah.
But two things. Managed well, you can actually get some better outcomes than an unmanaged event. So we can respond responsibly in a way that protects trust, ensures continuity, protects the business and its people and its customers. And in a never let a good crisis go to waste sort of way, that can be a platform for then moving the business to the next level. Really putting it on a different trajectory in terms of systems, processes, people, technology.
Exactly. It's those difficult times, those stressful times, those disasters that where make it great teams and make it great business. You come through that, you learn so much, and you get better from it.
Yeah, and great point. I mean, security doesn't make your business faster. Like that's the number one thing, right? It will slow things down, but the reality is that if you don't do that, like really bad things are going to happen. And we had get our legacy system, no antivirus on it years ago because it made it run slow. And it's like cool, but also like imagine what could go wrong. So
that's great, guys. Thank you. Like we started the conversation talking about the 2 a.m. incident, but really a lot of the lessons are what you do pre and post the event that really matter. So talking about having those relationships in place, having the IT stack continually updated and monitored, and having those partners around you, and the process for when things are going wrong, knowing who's going to control those communications and keep everyone together is vital. And then also on the other side of it, knowing that the incident serves as a way to improve business and your business processes afterwards is really important. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathan.